Thursday to you, Central Georgia. Thanks for tuning in here for a look at your extended forecast. A few things to go over before we get into what's in store as we head into the weekend. First and foremost, the biggest thing, we have gone ahead and decided to issue a weather impact alert in light of the first freeze of the fall season. Next Tuesday morning is the day that we need to be looking out for those sub-freezing temperatures, and it's actually not looking like you're just going to have your Dublins or your Eastmans or your Macons that get below that 32-degree mark. It does look like widespread lows that could even get down as low as the mid-20s as you wake up on Veterans Day morning. So what we're going to need to do in the meantime is keep an eye out for any frost and freeze alerts. More so the freeze alerts. We will very likely get a freeze warning issued for many counties here in Central Georgia as we get closer and closer to this actual date. And protect the 4 Ps: pets, plants, pipes, and people. We'll go over a little bit more specific detail, but I wanted to go ahead and throw this on your radar as we do get closer. It's still a ways away. We still actually have our fair share of afternoon highs that are near the 80-degree mark until we get there, so it's going to be quite the temperature swing. But go ahead and make plans, say maybe sometime on Sunday, to go ahead and start protecting those pipes, making sure that you're bringing in your furry friends at night, and of course making sure that you're layering up as you do head outside for that morning commute each day. And we also got a new update to our drought monitor. There's not too much change here in Central Georgia. The only changes we've really seen is this patch of a severe drought over here to the east, which already spanned into portions of eastern Johnson County and northern Emmanuel County. We see a southerly component to this shaded area now that stretches up into Treutlen County, Montgomery County, parts of Wheeler County, and northern Toombs County, pretty close to the Vidalia area. Everyone else remains unchanged. We were watching this area of a severe drought to see if it may be stretched a little farther down to the south. In fact, it's actually slimmed down because North Georgia has gotten their fair share of rain as of recently. You can see some areas of no color whatsoever the farther north that you travel. So with some of the systems that have come through in the past week or two, they have brought a pretty substantial amount of rain to portions of portions of the state of Georgia, excuse me. Not necessarily here in Central Georgia was what I was trying to say, but it's good to not see a lot of these conditions continue to worsen. Hopefully we can have some rain over the course of this weekend that will provide maybe some alleviation or just once again put a stalling to the worsening of these drought conditions as we go into next week. So your main headline, staying dry for one more day. It's been a very quiet stretch of weather with a steady warming trend as of recently. Thursday is going to be no change to that forecast, but rain will begin to move in later tomorrow. So we'll talk about the specific time that some showers and maybe even some storms could be in play as we go about the weekend, and then frigid air incoming next week. Of course, that is why we have our weather impact alert as we go into next Tuesday morning. So nothing but blue sky all across Central Georgia, maybe a few clouds if we're really trying to pick apart at maybe a little bit of a talking point. The sky cams have been very uneventful except for the beautiful sunrises and sunsets we've continued to have over the last couple of days with the clear start. Temperature-wise, mid and upper 60s, a couple of 70s already. Pretty similar warm-up to what we saw as of this time yesterday. 71 in Wrightsville, Dublin, down to Cochran, 72 in Swainsboro, but a 75 all the way down in Vidalia. Vidalia did see some temperatures slightly warmer than the rest of the bunch this morning. We only had 3 areas, I think, that got down to the upper 30s. That was Macon, Dublin, and Eastman, and they have seen a temperature increase of nearly 30 degrees, if not a couple degrees above that 30-degree mark over the course of this morning into now the late morning time frame, but transitioning into the afternoon time period. Current temperatures still mighty chilly across many portions of the East United States. 50s up in states like Indiana and Kentucky, 61 in Nashville, 69 degrees over in Montgomery. As you go down in Florida, actually the temperature in Vidalia is warmer than both Jacksonville and Orlando. But the warmest temperature, 79 degrees over in Houston. It does look like many of our neighboring states and many of our neighboring cities are kind of matching the temperature values that we do see, at least in the southeast. It's the farther west that you go that once again some mid and maybe even upper 80s are forecast over in Texas. So if you do think this afternoon is warm, which it's going to feel very similar to yesterday afternoon. If you thought yesterday afternoon was warm, it always could be a little bit worse. We could be talking about some temperatures flirting with the 90s like they have over in Texas. Very thankfully, we are not talking about that. Your dew point temperatures continue to show kind of a battleground between upper 40s, low 50s. Haven't really seen too much of an increase in the moisture content in the atmosphere, but maybe some areas of light green that are trying to build into our forecast. So right now it does look like areas down in Florida are slightly more humid than us. It is a lot more humid back over to the west as you make your way over to the Mississippi River. But most of the state of Georgia doesn't have that much moisture to work with. So that's once again going to lead into another calm and crystal clear afternoon here. Your winds and your wind gusts. You can see some widespread shades of blue farther up to the north and the northeast. But overall, we're not expecting much of a breeze today. The winds will have a bit of an easterly component to them if you do notice the breeze whatsoever. So here's a look at your numbers yesterday. 37 degrees for a morning low temperature, 8 degrees below your average of low temperature, But your high temperature that we recorded, 79 degrees, right on the dividing line between the 70s and the 80s. That was 7 degrees above your average of 72 this time of year. I think I forecasted around 77, so we got a bit warmer than expected. We could very well see the same scenario as we go throughout today. But still not as bad as it could be, like we always say. 1959, 86 was your record high temperature, and your record low temperature, 24 degrees back in 1991. Now, you did hear me talk about that first freeze incoming as we go into next Tuesday morning. I've seen one model even put the lows down at 24 degrees. That is the lowest one that I have seen as we go into next Tuesday. I don't quite think we make it there, but we very well could see a temperature decrease that far down into the 20s, as that's the only thing we've really seen over the last 3 days. We've just continued to see the models trend downward and downward, even farther and farther below that 32-degree mark. So speaking of your sunrises and sunsets, you did get a glimpse of that as of yesterday. We still haven't seen too much change since we had the time change this past weekend. I did edit this first date that you can see right here to November 10th, so that's going to be next Monday morning. That should be when our sunrise finally gets back to the 7 a.m. hour. Right now, just a couple minutes before 7 a.m., but sunset at 5:36 p.m. next Monday. So obviously, you probably have been noticing the beautiful sunsets as you are making your way out of work, maybe winding down for the day, or heading out to dinner with friends and family. But it has resulted in it getting dark a lot quicker. But when we have the sunrise a bit earlier than we did, say, about a week ago in time, it leads to a quicker warm up throughout the rest of the morning hours. Typically, we hit that morning low temperature between the 7 and 8 a.m. hours, right there around when the sun rises. And that will continue to be the scenario until we get all the way to December 21st, 7:33 a.m. sunrise. That's going to be where your morning low temperature, probably just past the 8 a.m. hour. But we still have about a month and a half before we do get to that official date of the first day of winter. Sunset will continue to get earlier until December 1st. 5:27 is our forecast earliest sunrise that we will have, and then it will continue to go a couple minutes later all the way into the first day of winter. But that sunrise will continue to get pretty substantially later day by day, maybe about a minute every day or two as we transition into the last month of the calendar year. So those are the important dates to be on the lookout for. Overall, not going to see any significant changes like we did, say, with the time change that did occur this past weekend. You should roughly plan on your sunrise being right there around 7 a.m. and sunset being around 5:30, 5:40 in the evening for the next 2 months. In terms of hours of daylight, just around 10 and a half hours of daylight as we go into next Monday. So we're hovering around 10 hours and 40 minutes of daylight right now, and that goes down close to 10 hours flat of daylight. But the shortest amount of daylight that we will see is 9 hours and 59 minutes on the first day of winter, which makes sense because that is typically the shortest day of the year in terms of the hours of daylight. So now let's go into your hour by hour temperatures, upper 70s as we roll into the afternoon, that 2 to 4 p.m. window. Like I've been talking about, that's when you're going to hit your high temperature. 77 is where this meteogram tops out, and then we begin the temperature decline. 74 at 5 p.m. and then 68 as we roll into the evening hours at 6 p.m. For your forecast today, I went with a little bit of a higher temperature because remember I said we overshot what the models were saying yesterday. 79 is my forecasted high, so that would be exactly like yesterday. There's really not too much change in between what you felt yesterday and what you are feeling for your Thursday. The only difference is your morning low temperatures may be just slightly warmer by about 2, 3, or 4 degrees compared to what you walked outside to yesterday. So a rinse and repeat forecast, nothing but sunshine, and there will be no rain chances to talk about for one last day but we do have some to talk about as we transition into tomorrow. So there are some clouds farther down to the south. That's actually what we got a glimpse of very faintly on our Skycam imagery. And it looks like they're mainly present in South Georgia up into northern Florida. Your temperatures in Florida, they were maybe a degree lower than what we saw, say, in Vidalia. And that's probably because they do have some cloud cover that is blocking that sunshine here at the 11 a.m. hour. So here's what Future View has to say for the rest of today. A whole lot of nothing. But then there will be some clouds that start to stretch into central Georgia as you walk out the door or maybe are waking up on Friday. And along with that, you do see a couple of these light green dots. I wouldn't put it out of the realm of possibility of mainly seeing just a brief sprinkle as you make your way outside, but that cloud cover and those rain chances really go away as we transition throughout the rest of the morning period and now into lunchtime on Friday, a mostly sunny day. And anything you have planned really in the afternoon hours on Friday is looking good to go. But after we get past sunset, starting around the 7 to 8 p.m. hours, cloud cover starts to move in from the west, and along with that, some pockets of some showers and even some storms back over in Alabama. But pay attention to that time. 8 p.m., the sun is already down, your temperatures are beginning their cool down. So as we get the cloud cover to move over central Georgia during this nighttime frame, it is going to result in maybe slowing down that cool down. So we're not going to see as low of temperatures as you walk outside on Saturday morning compared to the last couple of days. But we're really wanting to keep an eye out to see if any of those clusters of showers and especially some storms do get close to our neck of the woods during that nighttime frame on Friday. Right now, what I think is going to happen, temperatures are going to be cooling down. These storms are not going to have as much to work with in terms of fuel, so you will see them get lighter and lighter as we go across the overnight hours. And then as you walk out the door on Saturday morning, a mostly cloudy atmosphere with a few isolated pockets of some showers. I wouldn't even rule out the potential for maybe a low-end storm or two as we go throughout Saturday afternoon, mainly when we get this breaks in cloud cover, because that will allow for a pretty substantial warm-up with your high temperatures. And already we're going to be warmer, so we're going to be starting out ahead of what our temperatures have been. It's not going to take as much time to warm up, especially the earlier that this cloud cover clears. But I think what you still should plan on as you go throughout any of your outdoor activities on Saturday, just the occasional shower. It will be very isolated and localized in nature, meaning it's going to impact a select few areas. It might impact Pulaski and Dodge counties, but it might not impact the rest of central Georgia. This goes all the way into Saturday night where we transition into Sunday morning. Still a couple of these blips just popping up out of nowhere as we transition into the end of the weekend. And then it looks like one more round of rain tries to move in during those overnight hours into early Sunday morning. The long-range models pick apart at that line of rain really falling apart as we go into a cool portion of Sunday morning. So let's talk about your day 3 storm outlook, because we showed you this yesterday and we talked about the potential for some stronger to maybe even some severe weather up to the north and northwest of us. Well, now we have seen this present for almost all of central Georgia. So this doesn't include our southeasternmost counties, which kind of puzzles me, number one, already, because according to the latest model run of the graph, it looked like those rain chances down in our southeast were probably the better of any area here in central Georgia. But a low-end level 1 out of 5 risk means that we can't let our guard down. There is the potential for maybe a strong storm or two, but very localized in nature like we were talking about. It's not going to be widespread whatsoever. And I'm really not putting too much stock into this personally, because I'm just not seeing the parameters really come together to produce some severe weather. Some of the values are there, but there might be a little bit of difference in terms of the timing of some potential severe weather. It would obviously be during the afternoon window when temperatures are warmest on Saturday, but I think our frontal boundary that's causing our rain that comes in later on Friday into Saturday morning will have already passed through, so we're really going to lose that big mechanism of lift with that frontal boundary. Now, say if that frontal boundary that we saw coming in the nighttime hours into early Sunday morning was to pass through, say, a little bit earlier into Saturday afternoon, that would create more of a severe weather risk, because there is a lifting mechanism that can propel more widespread severe weather. But we're really not looking at anything in the way of that. I think a couple possible rumbles of thunder are going to be in the cards for your Saturday afternoon. Don't go canceling any outdoor plans just because of this level 1 risk. We will continue to keep you updated if we see a trend one way or the other, but right now it is looking like it's mainly just going to be hit or miss showers, and you have a very good likelihood of dodging the rain entirely for any plans that you have on Saturday. So now over the next 3 days, your afternoon highs, they really don't change much. Upper 70s, actually forecasted to get to the 80-degree mark. I kind of went with a lower end temperature there. We have some models that are saying 82, 83 even for a high temperature. That'd be the warmest numbers we've seen in, I would think, about a month or so. Last time we hit the 80-degree mark was on October 24th, because I was mentioning that day quite a lot yesterday. That was the last time we were above average with your high temperatures. So it's saying something that first time getting back to the 80-degree mark maybe in about 2 weeks. We'll see what happens with this, and we'll see if the numbers climb even higher than that. Then, of course, that could prompt something in the form of mainly some more widespread rain, or maybe even a couple of stronger to maybe even possibly a borderline severe storm. 20% chance of rain going into Friday night, so make sure that you bring the rain jacket with you for any Friday night plans that you have. I do expect a lot of the more widespread rain and storms over to the west of us back into Alabama to really lose their intensity as they cross the state line over here into Georgia during a cooler portion of the day. But 59 for a morning low as you walk out the door on Saturday morning. I did mention it's going to be cooler, but 59, you may say, Alex, that is pretty warm, especially given the standards that we've been given over the last couple of days, with numbers in the upper 30s, still in the lower half of the 40s tomorrow. But 59 degrees, near the 60-degree mark. It will be a more pleasant start to walk out the door on Saturday, but you're also going to notice the humidity a touch more, and that's also going to be a contributing factor to why your numbers don't necessarily get too far below that 60-degree mark. Most of our dew point temperatures will probably be somewhere in the 60s during the early portion of Saturday. And then maintaining a 20% chance of seeing a shower. I may up this to putting a thunderstorm icon, but once again, take that with a grain of salt. You might hear a couple rumbles of thunder, but I'm still not very confident in seeing anything in the way of severe weather. Morning low temperatures in the 40s today and tomorrow, into the upper 50s Saturday and Sunday. And take a look at that bump down. Yes, that is indicative of a front coming through. 58 down to 35 in between Sunday and Monday. But of course, I did mention the weather impact alert. That's going to be for Tuesday morning. We'll talk more about those once we show you what the long range models have in store for the rest of the weekend in terms of your rain chances. Afternoon highs still above average each and every day, even Sunday, 75, maybe a tad bit cooler than the upper 70s near 80 degrees, but 75 still 3 degrees above average for this time of year. And then we take another drop off a cliff. So it looks like a frontal boundary will drive through during the later half of Sunday, maybe even overnight Sunday into early Monday morning. But we are going to start to feel some chillier weather as soon as Monday morning, and especially as we go into Monday afternoon. High temperature of only 52 degrees. That would be our lowest high temperature we've seen as of recently. And that's also going to be paired up with sunshine as opposed to the clouds and the rainy weather that we did have when we had some upper 50s for high temperatures as of last week right before Halloween. So the humidity day by day, it is going to steadily increase. Like I mentioned, I do expect your dew point temperatures to be somewhere in the 60s for most of Saturday and most of Sunday before that really strong front does move through later on Sunday into Monday, and it drops the humidity completely off the muggy meters. So some substantially drier air is looking to funnel in, and just got a glimpse of some of that cooler air. We'll talk more about that now. Here's what your long-range models do have. I mentioned that we did see that line of rain trying to come in the overnight hours into early on Sunday morning. Well, the long-range models hint at that line of rain really falling apart, losing its steam, maybe trying to flare up just a little bit as we go into the afternoon, but I think that's going to be already after the frontal boundary passes through central Georgia. And this may be the first of many fronts. We actually have about 2 or 3 fronts that are going to be back to back to back that are passing through over the course of this weekend. But I do believe whatever that last one is will start to move through as we walk out the door on Monday. Cooler and drier air begins to funnel in, and that drier air does a good job of keeping the rain chances limited to basically non-existent, at least in our neck of the woods. North Georgia, they have the potential for maybe even seeing some flurries of some wintry precipitation. Not going to happen here. Do not get your hopes up whatsoever. 8 p.m. on Monday as we transition into Veterans Day on Tuesday. Guess those icons popped up a little bit earlier. But Tuesday at 4 p.m., nice and clear. Wednesday, going all the way into Thursday. I forgot I didn't throw any pause points on here because there's nothing to talk about. That drier air dominates the forecast, keeps the skies crystal clear. And by the time we get to next Thursday, it will result in a steady warming trend. We'll try to get the numbers back a little closer to average, but immediately after the passage of that frontal boundary is when your coolest air is expected to settle in. Let's take a look at your future view rainfall graphic. GFS not hinting at much, maybe 1/4 of an inch of rain here in central Georgia. The European gives us a bit of better resolution when it comes to your rain over the course of this weekend. Most areas only getting a couple tenths of an inch of rain, but pay attention to these gray spots where you can see maybe the potential for some pockets of heavier rainfall popping up, and once again, localized and isolated areas, just like I was saying. So you may see portions of your county that get totals upwards to an inch of rain, even down here to the southeast, where on this scale, it's indicating 2 inches of rain, maybe in portions of Telfair County, stretching over into Wheeler County. We'll see what comes to fruition, but once again, I do believe if you do see some higher rainfall totals, that will just be associated with a very isolated pocket of some heavier rain, maybe even a few rumbles of thunder. Don't necessarily think it's going to be attributed to severe weather. Now take a look at your morning low temperatures as we go into next week. That 58 on Sunday drops down 23 degrees for 35 as you walk out the door on Monday. But this is the reason we have our weather impact alert in place for Tuesday morning. 28 is my forecasted high. So yes, that means I'm taking into account all the models that I'm looking at, and this is still kind of a middle ground, believe it or not. I did mention that even one model this morning had a low of 24 as you walk out the door on Tuesday. We just continue to see those numbers go down with each update and each new model run that we get. The confidence just continues to grow that we will not only see at least freezing temperature in central Georgia, but widespread sub-freezing temperatures. 28, that's 4 degrees below freezing temperature. That's actually where you get into hard freeze territory. And we very well could have another sub-freezing day for Wednesday morning, which we'll talk about with your weather impact alert a little bit more coming up in just a moment. So what we're on the lookout for is this. This is going to be a freeze warning. I did mention those frost and freeze alerts. A freeze warning is really what we're focusing on now, especially given that the numbers are going to get below 32 degrees. If they were hovering right there around 32 degrees, that's where we pay more attention to a frost alert. But of course, frost doesn't have as many impacts as a freeze. It is issued when widespread significant freezing temperatures are expected. Okay, go ahead and check that box off because we're forecasting a low of 28, and that's just for the general area. A lot of the model runs are even hinting at some mid-20s, so we are going to be below that 32 degree mark, so widespread freezing temperatures or even lower. This is going to be for areas still in the growing season. So our growing season goes all the way until November 20th that you do see here in that tiny font at the bottom of this box. And the growing season goes all the way until that November 20th date, or it goes until each county's first hard freeze, 28 degrees or colder. Okay, check. It looks like we're going to hit those values as we go into next Tuesday morning, and that will put an end to the fall growing season a bit prematurely, you may say, because obviously next Tuesday, the date is November 11th. So that's about a little over a week ahead of when it's forecasted to end on November 20th. However, it's actually right on pace for what we normally see our first freeze date here in the Macon area. On average, your first freeze date, November 11th on Veterans Day. So we're going according to schedule, not too atypical to really see some freezing temperatures or sub-freezing temperatures in the early portion of the month of November. In fact, we have seen a way earlier first freeze, and that actually came October 14th back in 1988. And then your latest freeze, that came in 1918 on the day after Christmas. So obviously it's been a while since we've seen that earliest first freeze and that latest first freeze. But it looks like we're going to be right on pace with what we typically see for that first freeze date on average since we started taking records. So what do you need to know as of right now? It's nothing really of immediate concern. I showed you your forecasted highs the next couple of days. 78 today, or 79 today, 78 tomorrow, 80 degrees, and even a 75 as we go into Sunday. So this isn't anything that you need to go outside and go ahead and prep for as of right now. We still have a pretty warm stretch of weather to go through before the cool temperatures start to ensue. So this anticipated next Tuesday morning, and next Tuesday, if that's a little bit hard to remember, just remember Veterans Day morning next Tuesday. So what you want to do first and foremost, of course, just dress warm when spending time outdoors. Of course, when you're heading out the door, maybe going on that morning commute, you may notice some frost on your windshield. A good thing to utilize if you don't want to be freezing cold in the car when you hop in, utilize the remote start button that you do have, and that comes with a lot of the newer models of cars. And of course, your pets, bring them inside for the night. And I would go ahead and start doing that as of Sunday night, because temperatures 35 degrees, it is still a bit too chilly for your furry friends to be spending the night outside if they do spend a majority of the day outside. So go ahead and make a note. Sunday, bring the pets inside and keep them inside during the overnight hours for a couple of days. You obviously have to let them out to go to the bathroom and such, but don't let them outside for an extended period of time, especially with high temperatures somewhere in the low to mid 50s as we go into next Monday and Tuesday afternoon. Also, what you'll want to do on Sunday, drain and disconnect any outdoor hoses and faucets. So what that means is don't just turn the water off on the sprinkler spigot. Go ahead and press the nozzle on the hose. Make sure that you're draining all of that water that does remain in it and give it a good shake. Make sure that you're not leaving any water in there that could freeze overnight. And also any exposed pipes. So if that's a sprinkler spigot outside, maybe some form of a pipe that's in an uninsulated area, like say a garage that isn't heated well, make sure that you're wrapping those in insulation. And you could even take it a step farther to where if you're not going to be home, you're not going to be running that heat on occasion, you can leave your faucets dripping. I remember 2 years ago we had, or 3 years ago, I was a senior in college, we had a hard freeze during the couple days right before Christmas. And a lot of people were out of town. So that did result in some pipes bursting because you weren't running the heat, you weren't having that insulated. So a lot of those pipes did freeze over and eventually burst. And that obviously leads to some damages and a bit of a nightmare on Christmas. Water your plants before freezing temperatures occur. So like I said, Sunday afternoon, high temperature of 75. That is the perfect time to go outside and make sure that you're watering your plants, anything in the way of crops. But then after you do water them, allow for a little bit of evaporation. So you'll want to do that watering during the day. Then make sure you start to cover them or bring them inside. So potted plants, of course, you can just bring into a more well-insulated insulated area. But for things like crop fields and livestock, of course, that's all going to be within the ground. So you're going to want to find a good covering mechanism for that as you go into specifically Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday mornings, just to be safe rather than sorry. Then I think our numbers will get back above that freezing temperature. So now that we covered all that, let's go check in on your tropics for yet another day. And it is yet another day I'm telling you we are expecting no activity down here over the next 7 days. And also we're getting into a time of fall where we have basically a frontal boundary moving through just about once a week. Anything that does try to form down here in the warm waters of the tropics, maybe if it tries to even take a curve to central Georgia, a front's going to come through and it's going to guide that back out into the ocean. It is looking less and less likely that we're going to see any tropical impacts throughout the rest of hurricane season, but it will go until November 30th, and until then we will not keep our eye off the ball. So for next Tuesday morning, your weather impact alert, I think the time that you can actually expect some freezing temperatures is going to be about the 3 a.m. hour all the way until the 9 a.m. hour, just to be safe. That's going to be the coolest portion of next Tuesday morning, but go ahead and make your preparations on Monday night, because I imagine many of you do not want to wake up and set the alarm clock for 3 a.m. like I do myself every morning. Lows below 32 degrees. That's not only just a select few areas, that is going to be widespread for all locations in central Georgia. So what you need to do, protect the 4 P's, pipes, plants, people, and your pets. Make sure you're utilizing all those tips. If you want more information, of course, a quick Google search can do the trick in order to maybe find some kind of makeshift insulation device, to protect those outdoor pipes. Plants, of course, just covering them with some form of maybe a trash bag or just bringing them inside. Make sure that you're dressing warm. I know I'm going to get good use out of my puffer jacket next week. I would advise you do the same, maybe even wearing a beanie. Utilize the remote start on your car so you're not sitting in a cold car while it does try to warm up. Or maybe just going outside, cranking up the engine, going back inside, making yourself some breakfast, and then going back out to the car. That will be a good tip to utilize if you don't have that remote start button. And bring your pets inside. If it is too cold for yourself outside, it is too cold for your furry friends. I know those Siberian Huskies do love the cooler temperatures. you can let them play all afternoon long when temperatures are a bit cooler somewhere, maybe in the 40s or the 50s. You just don't want them out there for an extended period of time, especially if they normally do sleep outside in temperatures, say, that are somewhere in the 50s or the 60s. It is just best to try to protect yourself, your plants, your pipes, and your pets as we go into the near future. But this is next Tuesday morning. We wanted to get ahead of the game and go ahead and let you know that this is coming. Nothing to worry about for the immediate future. This is just one of those days that you need to pay extra special attention to, maybe take some more proper precautions courtesy of the weather. And it's the first time we've seen temperatures this low in, say, maybe late winter as of last year or earlier this year. So getting back into February, maybe even January when we did have some snow. It's been a while since we've seen some cold weather like this. So I want to make sure that we're giving you those proper reminders. We're giving you plenty of notice in order to take action. So go ahead and keep these thoughts and tips and tricks just in the back of your head as we go throughout the near future. That's going to do it for your extended forecast. We'll see you here at 11 a.m. tomorrow to give you a full weekend preview and talk more about this weather impact alert.